Tonight on Mark Latham's Outsiders, I talk to the incredible Milo Yiannopoulos about his lifelong fight against political correctness. We're going to have a look at the latest insanity that's come out of Australia's Human Rights Commission. We've got Zeg's Cartoons, the Meme of the Week, a new feature. We've got the Outsiders Outhouse and the Left Lunatic of the Week. Great show coming up. Thanks for watching. I'm coming to you in front of the magnificent Parramatta Town Hall in Western Sydney. No better destination. Stay tuned. Trigger warning viewers, you've entered a very unsafe space. This is Mark Latham's Outsiders. I'm advising all the snowflakes out there, turn it off straight away, go eat your tofu and lentils, because all you get from this program is straight talk. The all-important straight talk. There's no political correctness here, no identity politics, no cultural Marxism. We just try and give you good old-fashioned Australian common sense, the information, the sorts of things you don't see in the mainstream media, so you can make up your own mind about the big important issues facing our country. Now, on that, we don't see much in the mainstream media of the great Milo Yiannopoulos. Why wouldn't they be trying to learn from this guy? There's been so much sneering about Milo's forthcoming Australian tour. He had one very abbreviated TV interview, but the rest of the mainstream media are sneering down their nose at Milo Yiannopoulos. Well, he's on our program tonight to have his say about the important issues facing our culture, facing our political system. Now, part of the sneering was in the Australian newspaper, where they've written up in their cut and paste editorial that Milo isn't our type of guy, and they're complaining that he actually got some space there on a morning TV breakfast program. Well, who's the Australian newspaper to talk about these things? They're in the echo chamber, where they're unwilling to learn from someone like Milo. He's on our show tonight. Listen to what he's had to say. But at the Australian newspaper, on the morning of the American presidential election, they had that infamous front page that Hillary's already won, you can take it to the bank. The election was over, take it to the bank, Hillary Clinton had won. So the Australian newspaper made fools of themselves by not listening to the likes of Milo Yiannopoulos, who was part of Breitbart, part of the Trump push, and was saying that the Donald would be triumphant. Why wouldn't the mainstream media in Australia be wanting to learn from someone who was part of the most remarkable election result in our lifetime, the victory of Donald Trump as the President of the United States of America? It's a measure of how far out of touch the mainstream media has become, that they don't want to learn from Milo Yiannopoulos. Well, no such problem. On Mark Latham's Outsiders tonight, we'll be talking to him in depth in just a short while. But at the top of the program, I also want to have a look at some of the madness that's come out of the Australian Human Rights Commission. We've got the Race Discrimination Commissioner, Tim Soutphommasane. Here he is, Dr. Tim. He's produced some new ads. Shockers in terms of a negative portrayal of Australia. He thinks we're a fundamentally racist country. Let's have a look at the first of the taxpayer-funded ads that he's put out, the so-called elevator ad.
Allow me.
Thank you.
Now really, is there a person in the country who's ever had that type of experience at an elevator? You know, we've all been in them thousands of times. No one's ever seen that. The Australian Human Rights Commission, in trying to diminish and disparage our country, is inventing stuff that's just not true. We are known internationally as the world's most tolerant nation. We don't have racial problems and tensions on the street. Australians are laid back, accepting of all the different immigrant groups that have come here, as long as those groups work hard and have a go and do the right thing by our country. It's as simple as that. So that elevator stuff is complete baloney. And then Tim Soutphommasane, at our public expense, goes a step further. I'm known as an international expert on race relations in taxis because of past events cleaning up Mustafa on the streets of Western Sydney. Let's have a look at what Tim's got to say about the taxis.
You waiting long?
Where to?
He's first.
Oh, it's okay. Take you.
No, it's not okay. He was next.
Again, it's complete fiction. No one in Australia has had that type of experience that we know of. I've had the most famous taxi incident where Mustafa stole my property and I had to chase him and retrieve it by tackling him to the ground. Now that's what happened in my instance. That wasn't to do with race relations, it was about honesty. Stealing someone's property, that sort of stuff there just doesn't happen in Australia. The Human Rights Commission is being funded by the Australian government to make things up that are a negative portrayal of our nation. And you've only got to look at Tim Soutphommasane's his own life story to know how tolerant and accepting we've been as a nation of equal opportunity. I know Tim Soutphommasane. He went to my old school, Hurlston, a selective high school in southwest Sydney. When he went there, he was part of a very small Asian minority of students. Today, the student at selective high school, one of the best in the country, has got 85% Asian students. Where's the racism in that? Equal opportunity for all. The Asian students work hard, they get the selective entry, they're thriving at Tim Soutphommasane and my old school, Hurlston Agricultural High School at Glenfield in Sydney. Tim Soutphommasane himself grew up in Bonnyrigg in the southwest, a very working class area. Today, he's living the bourgeois left inner city lifestyle, he's got a top government job. Where's the racism in that? He is an example of someone promoted, maybe it was on politics more than merit, but he's thriving in the system. No racism against him. Why is he making up these things? A negative portrayal of our country. And furthermore, the closest major shopping centre to Tim Soutphommasane when he was growing up in southwest Sydney was Cabramatta, where the Vietnamese refugees came there. They boarded in the migrant hostel and came out and lived in Cabramatta and worked their ringer out to set up their businesses. And now today Cabramatta is a thriving, bustling, successful business centre where people are making plenty of money off the back of their hard work. Well, I salute those Asian migrants who are doing a wonderful job. And again, where's the racism in that? The whole Soutphommasane life story is an example of Australian fair play and equal opportunity. For this bloke to then turn around and try and crap in our country with these ads is a disgrace. We should reject it and celebrate the authentic Australian way, which is to give people a go, and if they work hard, they get ahead. It really is shocking. You don't see the racism. In fact, the only thing you've seen in Soutphommasane's life is a story of success and promotion and people who are thriving in that local community in southwest Sydney because they've done the right thing, either through the schools, the business centres, or in their own personal careers. So we reject that here at Mark Latham's Outsiders, as I'm sure the great majority of our viewers do. Now, two important things to understand about our platform here. Please go to the website, marklathamsoutsiders.com. Have a look at the website there and sign up all your friends, neighbours, anyone you know who wants to see a better Australia for part of our campaigning at Rebel Australia. And the other thing, in relation to our next guest, Milo Yiannopoulos, there's attempts out there, of course, the anti-free speech brigade, the censorship brigade are trying to close him down and cancel his Australian tour. Go to our website, don'tbanmilo.com, and sign the petition to allow this guy his free speech and his contribution to our democratic debate. Don'tbanmilo.com. Please support it, 100%. And in just a short while, we'll be talking to the man himself, Milo Yiannopoulos. You've got to see it. And joining Mark Latham's Outsiders from Miami, Florida, we have Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you must be the most banned and censored person on the whole planet. Milo, what makes your voice and your opinion so dangerous?
I think I probably am, and the reason for that is that I have turned the left into an object of ridicule. 10 years ago, everyone was terrified. Even 5 years ago, everyone was terrified of saying the wrong thing on the internet, cracking the wrong joke at work, making a pass at somebody in the wrong way, because they worried that the progressive left, the social justice warriors of the culture war left, were going to come for them, destroy their careers, damage their reputations, end their relationships. Well, I have educated people, I suppose you would say, into realizing that ridicule is the most powerful weapon you have against authoritarians, tyrants, and hypocrites. And I have turned the left, whether it's the campus feminists, Black Lives Matter activists, or the social justice left in the media, into objects of ridicule and figures of fun. I've demonstrated to people that nothing bad happens when you stick up a middle finger and say, go F yourself, to these elements in the left that want to control how we live, what we say, and how we can say it. That, I think, has been a really important purpose that I have served in culture, and will continue to do so.
Well, you do throw the ridicule out, and they certainly throw it back. It's like the ridicule wars, and sometimes I think you're in danger of being stereotyped in that way. Can you explain to our viewers what your positive set of beliefs might be, your positive agenda and vision for the sort of society we should have?
Sure, and to answer your first point, the left tries to make conservatives appear insubstantial or frivolous or trollish or clownish, or characterizes us as carnival barkers, as a way of not taking us seriously. It's a way of saying, I'm not going to engage with their arguments because I'm worried I might lose, so I'm just going to call them names so that you don't listen to them. Well, it doesn't really work anymore, because actually what you do is you ignite people's natural curiosity when you tell them that they shouldn't listen to something. When I was banned from Twitter, it was the best thing that ever happened to my career, because people came to find out what I was about and were asking, what is it about this guy that's so dangerous that they want him got rid of? Well, the answer is that I am painting a positive vision of the West, the way that I think it should be, the way that Democrat and Republican politicians seem to have forgotten to do, which is based on property rights, democracy, capitalism, and freedom of speech and freedom of expression. I believe that the best countries in the world to live in are those countries that have those things. And if you were going to be born into one of those countries, if you're going to be born anywhere in the world, you'd want to be in America, Australia, England, and Canada. Why? Because we have free speech, mostly anyway still. It's being eroded, but we still basically have mostly free speech, capitalism, and other freedoms. Now, that's a set of ideas that is anathema to the modern left. And in response to that, they try to call you a racist, try to call you a sexist, try to call you all manner of disgusting and horrible things. But at its heart, at its root, my vision is one of laughter and war. And that warfare is waged in the service of freedom and in the service of the values that have made Western civilization the greatest civilization in the history of our species.
Well, I've got to say, Milo, I've been banned and sacked a few times myself, and I normally find it to be a career booster, because it says to people, you've got something to say that others want to silence. And natural curiosity and human nature supporting free speech, they want to listen. Now, on that subject, there's a petition running in Australia called Ban Milo, Don't Give Him a Visa. And I want you to know, here at Mark Latham's Outsiders, we're fighting back in the name of freedom of speech. We're running a campaign, a petition called don'tbanmilo.com. You'll see it on our screen, don'tbanmilo.com.
Well, thank you.
We're very supportive
Thank
of
you.
free speech and your right to visit our country and have your national tour. Tell us about that tour and what you're hoping to achieve.
Well, it starts on December 1st, so I am Australia's Christmas present. I'm going to be coming to Adelaide and Perth and Sydney, the Gold Coast, and we're selling out tickets at an astonishing rate. We're doing really, really well. I'm going to be coming with my one-man show. I'm going to make people laugh. I'm going to make people angry. I'm going to make people think. These petitions are a sideshow. Nobody's, it's, what is it, 500-600 people, crazies on the internet who are really upset. You have a feminist over there who's named after a fruit, and I can't remember her name. It's she's not. Oh, Clementine Ford. You know her. And I want to come over and I want to show these people that banning and petitions and all the rest of it are not the way, and discussion and dialogue is the way. So I would love to see her, to debate her, because this fruit, I can tell you, is a lot more delicious than that one. I want to, to come and see the best of Australia, the best that Australia has to offer in terms of left-wing activists, campus crazies, and all the people in the media, because I want to demonstrate to to Australians at home that you don't have to just be scared and cowed into agreeing with these speech codes and these politically correct points of view. And I want to demonstrate to the left that you can force people to pretend that they agree with you in public, but you can't change people's minds on the inside. All you're actually going to do is create hostility and resentment and hatred for yourselves. And what the left has done throughout the West over the last 30 years is forced people to take positions in public that they don't actually believe. It's called preference falsification to sociologists. And what happens every once in a while is people say, you know what, enough. The last election in the US, the election of Donald Trump, Brexit, and my success and my rising profile are all signals that the left has overplayed its hand, that it is bullying people into holding certain positions without actually persuading them of the reasons why. And my tour is an entertaining show, but it's also a little bit of a teachable moment. It's a little bit of an educational, because I started on the college campus lecture circuit. There's some serious content in there. There's some serious stuff that people are going to enjoy thinking about and chewing over. Why we have allowed people, the least qualified people, by the way, in our society, the least qualified imaginable people to lecture us about skin color and sexuality and our sex lives, why we have allowed them to acquire such extraordinary and massive cultural and political power. So that's what my show is about. I hope that Australians will come and join us. We're going to have a lot of fun. And it's really, you know, the positive vision that you're asking for is laughter and war. I want to laugh at them, but I'm also going to wage serious warfare against these people who are destroying culture and poisoning politics. And the way I'm going to do that is by holding a mirror up to them, by demonstrating their hypocrisy to Australians, and by, you know, demanding that they justify the positions they hold, rather than having conspiracy theories about campus rape culture and the wage gap, to actually come with studies, with data, with logic, with reason, with the facts that justify their positions. And in my experience, certainly in America, leftists have proven themselves very unwilling to show up and debate. Nobody will debate me, nobody will go up against me, and I think that's a pity. I think it's sad. I think you know, that Australians and Americans where I currently work are smart enough to hear debates on the merits without name-calling, without conservatives being called racist, sexist, homophobe, and all this kind of nonsense. It doesn't work on me because I'm a gay Jew, Brit immigrant with a black husband. So get identity politics out of the way and let's talk about the actual merits of the arguments. Let's talk about Islam. Let's talk about free speech. Let's talk about feminism. Let's talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, free from name-calling, free from marginalization, free from no platforming, free from banning people from the country. Let's actually talk about the stuff. That doesn't happen very much anymore, and that, again, is what my tour is about.
Well, that's fantastic. I've got to let you know that my two sons, teenagers, are very excited about your tour. They're saying they want front row seats. So you've got a lot of support in Australia, particularly from young people.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'll make sure that they have front and centre tickets.
Yeah, but I've got to pull you up on one point. Here we don't name our feminists after fruit. We name them after nuts. And Clementine Ford is our top-ranking hazelnut, I want you to know. But there's an assortment of mixed nuts in Australia on that front. But can I raise with you this question of the...
Well, I have much bigger nuts than they do.
Okay, that's great to hear. Can I raise with you the question of the alt-right? We hear a lot of talk about the alt-right. I was interested in this debate through the Trump ascendancy, where it seemed to me there was a split, almost a crisis in conservatism. You had civility conservatives like Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, who wouldn't fight against the leftist takeover of institutions. And Trump brought to the table a muscular form of conservatism where he was going to take on these people front and centre. But then the whole notion of an alternative right seems to have been hijacked by the left, defining other people's beliefs. Their own beliefs are garbage, of course, but they love defining everyone else's belief for them. How do you see this debate about the true meaning of the alt-right?
Well, when I wrote in 2016 what was probably the most influential piece of political journalism that year, An Establishment Conservative's Guide to the Alt-Right, I wrote it with my colleague at Breitbart, Alan Bukhari. It was intended as a guide to the broadest possible definition of the alt-right, which was this new populist nationalist movement that hated political correctness, hated feminism, was skeptical about immigration, particularly worried about Islam. And I intended that to cover effectively the whole generation Trump, that half of the Republican Party that had just split off and decided that culture and immigration were far more important than the stuff that Marco Rubio is always banging on about. That's by far the most exciting and the most interesting slice of conservatism in America. But the media and some elements within the alt-right have since redefined the term, and now it's a synonym with neo-Nazi, and as a result I have nothing to do with it. You know, I have no sympathy for these people whatsoever as a consequence of that. But it was originally, the way it started, a way to define a very broad movement. Some people pulled into politics, by the way, simply because they hated being told how to speak and what to say. And that was true of a lot of the younger supporters. So now that the word simply is a synonym for white supremacy or white nationalism or neo-Nazism, I have nothing to do with it. But there was a time at which, and we still need a new word for this, we still need a word to describe this other half of the Republican Party that split off and voted for Trump. There's still a need to define that and a need to discuss it, because it's by far the most important, interesting, and enjoyable shard of politics anywhere in the world. And you see it, you see it rearing its head in England with the Brexit vote. You see it rearing its head in Australia a little bit. And for me, as a chronicler of that movement and of some of the people within it, I've of course been tarred by the left as a supporter of it. Well, what I just described myself as was a fellow traveller on some issues, because I agree with them about immigration, Islam, and political correctness. The race stuff I hate, but they are right about some things. And those things that they're right about, I think, are the most important questions in our civilization. They're the questions about how men and women talk to one another, questions about about racial politics and racial identity, questions about liberty and free speech and free expression, what we're allowed to say and how we're allowed to say it. Those questions are some of the most important issues, and they're questions that the left has prescribed language around, so that the only conclusions you can arrive at if you use politically correct language are theirs. Well, I don't like politically correct language. I don't like any kinds of speech codes, and in my tour you can expect, lots of jokes you're not supposed to make, lots of politically incorrect speech, and people making jokes about things that have traditionally been off limits. That was originally some of the promise of the alt-right, was this new world in which you were not going to allow the left to define language and thereby ease people into the right answer to debates, but we were instead going to have a classical liberal J.S. Mill style marketplace of ideas. Well, my tour is a marketplace of ideas. I take questions from the audience. I have interesting and provocative people on with me. I hope that will happen in Australia too. And so the really critical bit of the alt-right, the bit that I originally liked, which has now disappeared, was a resistance to the left's political correctness and social justice craziness. The left's kind of relying on conspiracy theory and bullying instead of persuasion, logic, reason, and fact.
Well, here in Australia, what you're talking about, we call it the outsiders movement. That there's an outsiders movement that rebels against identity politics, political correctness, the elitism of the ruling bourgeois left. So you might think of that as a term in the future, because it's a terrible shame. The defining skill, the only skill of the left, is to define and stitch up other people's beliefs. And just as trots in society are perhaps 0.01% of the population, so too white supremacists. But now they've tried to refashion the Trump movement as reflecting those white supremacists who are a tiny, tiny majority in your country and in ours. So where does the Trump or outsider movement head into the future? How's he governing? Is there a governing model for this sort of politics?
Well, with the departure of some of the people in Trump's administration that were the standard bearers for anti-political correctness, populism and nationalism, I do worry the direction, the trajectory of this administration. I am concerned about it. But the movement will obviously survive Trump. It existed before him. I think that really if the last 30 years were about speech codes and political correctness, school marmishness and the rearranging of our crayons for us by leftist authoritarian engines of civil society, whether it's academia or the media or politicians or whatever, what have you. The next 30 years is going to be the most sustained, extraordinary pushback against that. And my popularity is evidence of the fact that Australians, Americans, Europeans alike are starting to get a little bit ticked off with the hectoring, nannying, bullying social justice left, the media, Hollywood producers, their professors, all of the people in polite society who are telling them what words are okay to use, what clothes it's okay to wear. If I eat sushi, is that called cultural appropriation because I haven't gone through the experiences of being a Japanese person? This stuff is ludicrous garbage designed to shame and scare people into believing that they might be unconsciously racist. Well, you're not racist for eating sushi. You're not racist for wanting dreadlocks. You're not, this stuff has become a cancer. And my tour and my career really is dedicated to eradicating that cancer. The good news is that underneath the millennials, you have this young generation of people who are about 13 right now, and they really hate BuzzFeed, they hate feminism, they hate all kinds of social justice, political correctness. They absolutely loathe feminism and speech codes and all the rest of it. I have huge hope for the future, because these people are watching. When I get banned from Twitter, it makes me the coolest thing in the world to them. It makes me irresistible to them. When other right-wing speakers get called names, they see that the arguments are not being engaged with, people are merely name-calling. And these young 13, 14-year-olds are the future as far as I'm concerned, and they're a huge portion of my fan base. And also, by the way, a lot of them love Trump, love, whatever. This is the next generation of what you call outsiders, and they're rising, they're coming. They're coming behind after the millennials. I'm a millennial, my generation messed up everything, and I'm sorry on behalf of my crazy generation. But there is another one coming up, in the cyclical nature of generations, there's another one coming up that does not believe this garbage. And I think what's important to us, as the millennials grow and assume positions of importance and influence in government and politics and the media, we remind ourselves that there is another generation coming up underneath, and we nurture it. Because those are the kids who are going to ridicule the social justice warriors out of public life. And I'm very happy to be a sort of icon and a role model for a lot of those young people.
Well, that's a really interesting point. A lot of people in Australia, older people, despair at what's being taught in our universities and schools, saying, oh, well, look at the brainwashing of young people to accept identity politics. But again, my two teenage sons say to me, Dad, we live in the world of the internet, YouTube, freedom of information. We don't like any restrictions on the availability of opinion and information. So you're an optimist as to the possibilities of the next generation, and you think that they'll emerge brushing aside the stuff they hear at school and university.
I am. I'm more of an optimist than most conservatives and libertarians because I think I have more access to that generation than perhaps any other conservative around because my fan base starts so young, maybe 30 years younger than any other conservative in public life. And for that reason, I have a sort of unique insight into the psychology of this generation coming up behind. And personally, I think we have many, many reasons to be optimistic. We have a lot of cause for optimism and celebration because this young generation coming up behind do not like my generation's nannying and pearl clutching at all. I take that, I'm very enthusiastic and happy and optimistic about that. Unlike, as I say, a lot of other conservatives. And it's one of the reasons I win, because I'm happy. Because you see me in interviews and I've got a smile on my face. I'm not scowling and fulminating and furious like so many other conservatives that you'll see in the media all the time. The reason for that is that I know it's going to turn out all right. But we do have a generation to get through right now, which is very, very totalitarian in the way that they believe politics should be conducted and the beliefs that they have and the way they treat others. Terrifying statistics are coming out from the Brookings Institute in America about how many young students believe that violence is an acceptable way to respond to ideas you disagree with or people that you don't like. That has to be reversed. It has to be reversed wholesale. It begins with education. We've got to start, I think we've got to start naming and shaming and hounding professors who refuse to teach their students the totality of political opinions and who punish conservative and libertarian thought. It's only really, libertarian thought, cultural libertarianism. It's only a classical liberalism that is going to save Western civilization against, whatever is coming at us from the East. And we've got to protect it. It is the most important thing we have in culture. It's the most important thing in the world. It's the most important thing there is. Your right to be able to do, say, and be whatever you want. That's the most important thing in culture. And fortunately, as I say, the younger generation gets that. And they look up to people like me who will tell the naughty, mischievous, mean jokes about feminists, mean jokes about Black Lives Matter activists, mean jokes about everybody. They see, I'm trying to educate them, and I think I'm having a lot of success in this. I'm trying to educate them into realizing that nothing bad happens when you turn around and stick a middle finger up to the worst people in the world and tell them to go screw themselves.
Well, we're running out of time, unfortunately. Just one last point. You mentioned violence. How do you explain the rise of Antifa, who we do see on the streets of Australia attacking people? Where have they come from, and what does it mean?
Well, when the institutional left teaches kids, as they are teaching kids, that violence is an acceptable response to ideas, they break that understanding that we've had for generations, that you can yell at somebody, you can disagree with somebody, but you can't punch them in the face because they don't have the same politics as you. When you start to dissolve the boundaries between speech and action, when you start to unpick those clean, neat definitions which are so important to keep law and order and to keep a civilized society, you inevitably give rise to movements that want to respond to ideas with violence, with intimidation, with these kinds of tactics. Now, Antifa has formed because of this barrier breaking down, which is leftist college administrators and college professors, but it has grown because it has been enabled by universities. UC Berkeley have given heads-ups to domestic terrorist organizations in advance of my talks, leaked our speaker lists to drum up opposition and to invite violence onto their own campuses because they want to make it as complicated, expensive, and terrifying as possible to be a conservative in public life. So long as these wacko lefty female police chiefs in California are telling police to look the other way and not police properly, so long as the media is making excuses for domestic terror, so long as left-wing Democrat politicians refuse to disavow and refuse to condemn the worst actors on their own side, violent leftist protesters, so long as all those things obtain, violent movements are going to grow. Violent movements are going to intimidate and terrify young libertarians and conservatives. The good news is the Democrat Party has finally started to say Antifa is unacceptable. And my hope is there's going to be some kind of cascade effect in universities where violence simply will not be tolerated anymore. But the reason Antifa has grown is because the institutional left has allowed it. They've kind of looked, they haven't actively said, oh, well, it's really good that these conservatives get run off campus. Well, some of them, of course, do. But for the most part, they don't say it's good that these conservatives are run off campus. But they definitely look the other way when we are. And they definitely sort of tacitly nudge, nod, wink, allow this stuff to happen without condemning it strongly and without allowing, for instance, in California, particularly, the police to do their jobs. So Antifa has grown because it has been allowed to by the institutional left. That has got to come to an end. And I think the Trump election and my popularity demonstrate the public has no appetite and no patience for people who respond to ideas with their fists.
Well, Milo, thanks for joining us today on the show, and all the very best for your tour down under. We look forward to seeing you in December all across the country. Good luck with it.
Well, thank you so much. Take care.
Okay, you too. Cheers. Welcome back to the show. Wasn't that amazing stuff? Milo Yiannopoulos is a really intelligent, insightful person. Why wouldn't the mainstream media want to understand those views, learn from them, and report them fairly? It's just really ridiculous. The outrage industry trying to crank up all these elements of outrage, little things people have said that upset some snowflakes. It's quite ridiculous. He had some important things to say, and I welcome his contribution, not only to our program, Mark Latham's Outsiders, but his forthcoming national speaking tour. Now, on with other irreverent stuff. Here, anti-PC at our program. Let's have a look at Zeg's Cartoon of the Week. And it's on the energy issue, where he's got Malcolm Turnbull and Bill Shorten digging away, and it's true that Malcolm's Snowy River, man from Snowy River scheme hasn't been working too well, and under the ground that's all they find. Coal, gas, uranium, and you know why? That's all there is there. So in terms of cranking up energy security in Australia, Zeg, you've made the valuable point. Why don't we have a nuclear industry in Australia? We're the world's most geologically stable continent. We've got the stuff in the ground. We export it for other countries to have nuclear power. Why haven't we got it in Australia? Magnificent from Zeg. And a new addition to our show, we've got a memes department at Mark Latham's Outsider. And this one sent the snowflake lefties berserk in the gay marriage debate. Let's look at our meme of the week. This is the new meaning to shotgun wedding. Blokes can't have kids, of course. They can't get pregnant. So if you're going to have a shotgun wedding in the new world of same-sex marriage, there's going to be a bloke with a gun in a wedding dress. Absolutely fantastic. And it freaked out the lefties, which made it the meme of the week. Absolutely tremendous. Congratulations to our department working overtime in producing memes for Mark Latham's Outsiders. We've also got the Outhouse, all the contributions that you've sent in during the week. I thank you again for that. And if you've got views about the program or any of the issues that we cover, write them in to the email address there, mark.latham@rnnmail.com, mark.latham@rnnmail.com. I'm there on the Thunderbox, and I'm going to read out the contributions that we got this week. The first is from Robert in Sydney. Hi Mark, just wanted to thank you for the excellent way in which you've given Mrs. A, the brave school teacher, a platform and support on your program. She tells the truth and has the intelligence to back it. Back to our local area and where you and I both live, I know you're no longer in the Labor Party, but I'm sure you still have contacts. Well, not really, Robert. Is there any chance that you can speak to them about their disastrous development proposals for our local area, and if appropriate to get Dick Smith and your new party leader David Lionhelm back on the show to discuss the demographic population time bomb in Western Sydney and New South Wales in general? Well, we will be hammering the issue of cutting Australia's migration rates to take the pressure not only off urban sprawl in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, but also the pressure off the housing affordability crisis. But I just want to touch on one of the points that Robert made about Mrs. A. You can see here an item that was in the Sydney Daily Telegraph newspaper last week where Mrs. A really put the initiative on the table. She covered the horrific things that were being put out by the Belfield Islamic College in southwestern Sydney. And the New South Wales Education Minister, Rob Stokes, has responded by putting forward legislation so that Australian values are taught automatically in our schools, and we're not going to have the likes of the Belfield College at Rossmore in southwest Sydney putting out a handbook which says that, and I quote, peace, stability and justice can only be achieved through the establishment of Islam. Well, that's not the Australian way. We don't have that type of Sharia law or religious focus, and I pay tribute to Mrs. A, as did Robert, in saying that she put these issues bravely on the agenda, and the New South Wales government has now responded. She raised it on our program. It's an achievement for which she should be applauded, and it's what we're here to do, to raise the issues you don't see in the mainstream media and to force governments into the proper approach. In this case, in New South Wales, the Education Minister legislating to have proper Australian values in our schools. Hats off to the great Mrs. A. Well done. Our second item in the Outhouse comes from Angela in Melbourne. Further to your item last week on Uniting Care's Life Assist pumping out the LGBTI claptrap, recently I visited a centre called Burke and Beyond in Melbourne, which provides post-school training activities for young people with disabilities. On the organisation's stationery, they display a part of the footer alongside the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flag, a miniature rainbow flag. Truly. Since when, this is what Angela's asking, since when did the rainbow's colours constitute an official flag? Since when did it define a specific people, nationality or ethnic group? Since when was it given this recognition in our country? Since when has LGBTI politics become a core part of the organisation's mission? She writes, time to find another provider of NDIS services for my child. Well, this just shows how divisive identity politics can be. Angela's making the valid point that these organisations need to be truly inclusive and not go down the path of a particular brand of politics. The rainbow flag doesn't have any official status, and there's a user of the service who, for valid reasons, is very much alienated by the use of that flag on the letterhead for the service for her disabled child. So disability is much more important than politics. Just get on with the job there at the Burke and Beyond service in Melbourne and forget about all the LGBTI claptrap, okay? We just don't need it. And finally, we've got Gary in Brisbane writing as follows. I saw your video about female-only recruitment in the Australian Federal Police. Something similar is happening in the Queensland State Police, although it's more carefully hidden. Training and entry standards have been watered down to assist female applicants to the point where they are virtually guaranteed entry. How can this be happening when public safety requires hiring the very best person for the job? Great point, Gary. Please investigate what's happening in Queensland and expose it as you did with the AFP. No one else seems willing to take on the issue and the feminazi sisterhood pushing it. Why has the political system become so weak? Why are people so scared of left-wing activists? Well, they get scared, Gary, because of the outrage industry, the demonisation of people, and of course, in the police, you want the very best person hired for the job. Public safety is at stake, and it doesn't really matter if someone's white or black, male or female, straight or gay. Just get the best person for the protection and safety of the Australian people, particularly at the Federal Police, where they're involved in the heavy, important duty of counter-terrorism. It is happening right through the state police forces. Thanks for highlighting that in Queensland, and we will be investigating further. Thanks for your contribution, Gary in Brisbane. Now finally, for our viewers, we're going to have a look at the Left Lunatic of the Week. Zeg brings up this wonderful, wonderful array of leftists. I mean, he's barely got any room on the canvas now. We've corralled so many left lunatics. Look at them. The whole array. You can see Tim Soutphommasane, Sam Dastyari, Julia Baird, Lisa Wilkinson, boy, Warren Ench, Gillian Triggs, Van Badham, and it's still Peter Fitzsimons in the red beret trying to get attention, pick me in his red bandana. And the Left Lunatic of the Week, well, that's Eric Jensen, the editor of the leftist Saturday newspaper. No one reads it except Jared Henderson for academic research purposes. Eric Jensen is the Left Lunatic of the Week. He's got that amazing bird's nest hairstyle. And if you want to know why he's the Left Lunatic of the Week, we're going to play the clip from the drum program, the ABC drum. He was debating James Morrow, who we know well from this program. Let's have a look at the debate, which ends with the atrocious comments from Eric Jensen.
I've been riding in lifts for 43 years. I grew up in a high-rise tower. I have never, ever, ever seen anything like this happen in my entire life. Now, I'm not denying that racism is a problem, but I think that the Human Rights Commission is drawing a very long bow when it's trying to say that racism is so pervasive here. And just some statistics from their own website. These guys, in the year 14-15, had 561 complaints under the Racial Discrimination Act. In the previous year, 429. So even by their own numbers, racism is declining. It feels to me like this is really an effort.
Racism is declining. This is a whole other
Like
subject.
an
Eric
effort
Jensen.
to drum up business.
Eric Jensen, just
Firstly,
quickly.
you don't make complaints to the Human Rights Commission about casual racism. Casual racism is the fact that we have an all-white panel right now having this discussion. I mean, casual racism affects people's lives in every way. The ad is not depicting someone refusing to ride in a lift with someone. It's depicting someone not holding that lift with someone. And I'm certain that happens. Of course that happens. And it's not for you, James, to decide if it does or not.
Well, I think that what you're looking at with this is the attempt to find racism in so many common everyday interactions.
Because it's there.
But
that's why we need to talk about it.
But what you're doing is you're saying that racism is the reason why absolutely every sort of thing
Yes.
happens. So you're looking for
Racism is the reason you have a job. Racism is the reason I have a job.
Racism is the reason why we have jobs.
And as white
Yes,
blokes,
it is.
we're
Structural
all...
privilege.
As white
Structural
blokes,
privilege
we're all...
predicated on racism
Okay.
is the reason that we all have jobs. Everyone on this panel has a job because they benefit from some kind of racism.
Well, Eric Jensen, seriously, if you really believe you've got your position there at the Saturday newspaper because of racism, you bloody idiot, resign. If you truly believe you're a beneficiary of racism, you had any principles, quit your job and employ someone of a different skin colour if you think that's how the system worked. So a true left lunatic of the week arguing about those Human Rights Commission ads we saw earlier on, that everyone gets their job because of racism. Well, resign, mate. Get out of there and live up to the bullshit that you've actually put forward on that program instead of just spruiking it. Now, James Morrow, congratulations for making the valid point that even in the Human Rights Commission complaints, they haven't got evidence of widespread racism in Australia. James Morrow from The Telegraph, well done, well said. Eric Jensen, have a good look at yourself, because that's just the zaniest argument you'll ever hear, and a condemnation of your own organisation. That is true left lunacy. So thanks very much for watching the program. We'll be back same time next week, Wednesday, 8 p.m. We're going to have a very, very special guest, an icon, a legend of Australian public life on Mark Latham's Outsiders next week. That'll be the great Sam Kekovich. I can't wait. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.